On today's episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Prakash, the co founder and CEO of Xano, a visual backend development platform that empowers product minded builders to create scalable software without writing traditional code. Frustrated by the disconnect between product teams and engineering, Prakash built Xano to bridge that gap, giving non developers access to powerful backend tools without compromising on performance, security, or scalability. In this episode, we discussed why the backend is often the most complex and overlooked part of software and how Xano simplifies it, and how AI is both a disruptor and collaborator in product development, and what roles human creativity still play in shipping great software. If you got a business idea but feel blocked by technical limitations, this conversation will show you how visible development tools like Xano can help you bring your vision to life faster than ever. Prakash, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, my name is Prakash, co founder CEO of Xano. We are a backend visual development tool and really excited to be here, chat with you.
I'm so glad to have you here. I think that this is just like kind of serendipitous timing, knowing that there is such a big push in the marketplace towards more back end visual visibility through visualization, but we'll get there eventually. Do you mind kind of walking us through your background and what inspired you to create Xano?
Sure. Yeah, so I think this was in 2013 or 2014 timeframe. Actually embarked on the journey of my first startup, which I've joked before was 3.5 years of me getting the crap kicked out of myself. A lot of those mistakes and a lot of the money spent was on the development process, right? Just paying a lot of money to engineers. And I had found myself as a fairly technical person kind of removed from the process because if an engineer told me a feature was going to take 3 weeks and it's kind of like going to a car mechanic, there's not really a whole lot that I could do about it. And so I always wanted a tool where I could participate in that process. And there were other like no code tools at the time, but none that really allowed me to articulate the details that I wanted and none that could be really production ready. And so a couple years later, I have two co founders and myself wanted to fill that gap, the gap of no code at the time. And that was really around security, scalability, and reliability, and also that transparency and business logic. And so that's when we launched Xano. And we've been able to really become that prominent leader that allows people to build the hardest part of a software application, which is the backend, and make it accessible to the people like me that are more product oriented that wanted to participate in that process. We launched in January of 21. We've served that need really well. We're kind of well known and coupled with tools like, Webflow, Web, Bubble. We are the backend that kind of powers their front end, and we continue to evolve to serve the needs of the market.
I'm sure that you are well aware of everybody out there in the last couple of weeks hopping on board with this whole vibe coding thing. So we have a lot more tools that are readily available for people to be able to create front end,
Yeah.
but not as many tools available to create and support back end. So if I'm hearing you right, this is where Xano kind of lives
Yeah,
and
and I
can
think
live.
I think it's a good observation. And you kind of have to ask, well, why are there so many tools to create front end and not necessarily the back end? Really, the answer lies in the training data and the context. AI has a ton of access to HTML, CSS, all of the different front end components, so it can generate beautiful applications on the front end very, very quickly. But when you think about what makes an application unique, what makes your processes unique, business logic isn't something that's widely available, right? So it can only kind of guess at what it thinks that you need. And oftentimes it gets it wrong. And then when it gets it wrong, today, there's kind of only two ways to edit what the AI gives you. You either have to know how to code to make it your own, or you can generative prompt. So you're basically texting with it. But we believe in that third way, which is a visual way to pick up where the AI leaves off.
I think that you make a good point with that too, because there aren't very many tools that are focused on the back end. because usually you'd have to plug it into some sort of traditional database system, and there's a ton of those. But if you don't know how to code, you're not going to easily be able to pair or make your database backend to the front end that you just used no code to be able to produce.
That's right. And for the people that don't necessarily know, the backend is very complex and comprehensive. I always give Amazon's one-click buy as an example. On the front end, you have a button and it says buy now, and you click it, and there's a package that ends up on your doorstep the next day. But on the back end, there's a couple things that needs to happen. It's got to check that you're Brian. It's got to check your credit card. It's got to check the fulfillment centers. You might have to do like 100 operations to verify you are who you say you are and get that package to your doorstep, to like coordinate with the carriers, etc. And so that piece of it is what makes your company unique, and it is the hardest part. And so we really embarked on a journey to take care of that heavy lifting. And the backend is kind of broken up into these distinct parts. There's kind of the infrastructure piece, and we call that DevOps in the business, like how things are set up and kind of met with scale as you grow. The integrations, what services you connect to, the security, making sure that things are really tight and compliant. There's the business logic piece, right? The things that I was mentioning that make your business unique. And then finally, the data piece, which is where you store your data, like the database. So all of those things like are non-obvious to a lot of people, even technical people, and we try to make that accessible and very easy, and we handle the hardest parts of the back end for you.
So would you, I mean, considering the analogy of an iceberg here, right? Like there's only a small portion of what it is that you actually see typically, and then you're helping support all the underneath pieces with Xano.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in fact, in our sales decks and et cetera, we usually use the iceberg as a metaphor just to show you how complex it can be. And I think like there are other kind of back end type providers out there, but I think where we separate ourselves is when you are doing more business critical applications that require top notch security, top notch scalability requirements. We are the tool that you graduate into because we do not sacrifice. Our co-founder CTO was the lead DevOps on Google Photos. It started with the server on his desk. So that is kind of the infrastructure that you and thought and DNA that is built into Xano and that you get to enjoy when you trust your projects with Xano.
So let's take a step back and talk about Xano for a bit. Just kind of a high level, 15,000 feet. What is it? Who is it that you're working with from like, who's your ideal customer? And let's start there.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier, we are a visual backend development tool. And the backend, I articulated those different parts of the backend, right? You can think, if you think about like our core, three core primary pieces of the backend, it's the server. We provide like the server that we deploy your application on. We provide a Postgres database. That's where you store your data. And then we give you a business logic builder. And that is so you can articulate what the core policies and workflows are for your business. And that business logic builder can be made into an API that you can connect to any front end that you want. And that front end can be a mobile application, a web application, a business intelligence tool. And as of next week, actually, you're going to be able to connect that business logic to an AI agent. We want to be the place where you store your business logic and connect it to the services that you want. So that's kind of what Xano is. And our whole philosophy is we're doing it visually because we want you to understand and be a part of the process. And we believe the visual way is the best way to do that. So that's the first piece. Regarding your second question around who we serve best, we generally tend to serve kind of a more systems thinker, technical user, someone that may have copy and pasted code before, but they're not necessarily a programmer. So when they need to build something on their own and they don't have access to engineers, but they have that mentality, we serve them very well because with those core concepts that they do understand, they're able to actually build quite a bit. And I think it's important to note that We basically are a platform that also are good for developers. So while a product owner type might build something, a developer can provide architectural supervision because we don't abstract away the concepts. We use the same concepts that a software engineering person might use when they come to use the product.
Do in the first case where it's someone who is more product oriented, do you guys provide support where they might have a knowledge gap between being able to put in the processes visually and what actually needs to take place to make sure that their application is operational?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces. So the first is just like, how do I build something? I think from a product owner, just understanding the world around how databases, APIs, and those things relate together. We have a really rich set of documentation, and we also have a very robust library of YouTube videos. If you go to youtube.com/no code backend, everything from what is a backend to how do you merge two JSON arrays. So that's the first piece. The second piece is as you start to build and things start to become more business critical for you, we now have these Xano AI assistants that you can ask. You can say, "Hey, is this the best way that I can build this? Do you have any recommendations? What do you think?" And it can make recommendations and even do the changes for you to enhance the performance of your database specifically. And there's going to be more parts of the application that's coming soon.
Is that something that you guys built in-house, or is it something that you're piggybacking off of a commercial available?
Yeah, right now we leverage Gemini internally to basically help make those decisions. And we will continue to use the best in class models to help you build because when it comes to basically the how around the performance, they just do a phenomenal job with that. I think when it comes to the more esoteric things regarding your own business workflows, those are the types of things that we'll probably start to build a little bit more custom. But for now, we kind of use the best in class models.
I think that makes sense. There's so many, I mean, in all fairness, I think that there's 4 or 5 models out right now that kind of support most organizations when it comes to what they're calling their AI. So they're
Sure.
building on top of another model that's already existing, and they all work great. So I mean, it's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing. It's just that I think if there's ever consolidation onto into certain platforms, that
Yeah.
may oppose a future challenge for organizations.
Yeah, for sure. I think the way we look at it is that these models are getting so good and the speed of iteration on these models is so fast that they will be commoditized in the sense that it won't really matter. Like you won't have an opinion on what model you use as long as it kind of generally gives you what you need. And I think that our goal as a business is if there's already the smartest people in the world working on these models, it doesn't make sense for us to invest the tens of millions of dollars to try to create our own when we don't see the unique business value and more importantly, value to our users by doing that in-house. So I think there may come a time, but for right now, I think we kind of can ride or stand on the shoulders of giants when it comes to leveraging those models.
I think that that's such a smart business idea or proposition is to let them exist. Let those people do what they're great at doing and not try to reinvent the wheel. What would you suggest to like a business owner who has an inherent reluctance because of security?
Yeah, so I would say that it depends on what the use case is. If you're building an application, you're a business owner, and security is paramount, then obviously there's considerations probably on not using one of the commercial models like OpenAI or Anthropic's Claude. You're probably going to want to use something open source and you want to make sure that that is hosted obviously within your own infrastructure so you have control. It's not necessarily going out and there's no risk of it training on the information that you don't want it to. Xano actually makes this very easy if that is something that you would like to do. I think when it comes to basically using one of the chat services, I think it is worth paying probably for the premium plans where contractually you have your data safe and secure to just pull out information and insights. But of course, you always want to be careful what data you are feeding into that chatbot. Even if they say that everything is secure and they're not training on it, it's always best practice hygiene to understand the policies that you want to enforce, and then make sure your team members aren't sharing sensitive information that they shouldn't be.
I think that's great advice. I know that there's still a lot of people out there who are kind of on the fence on whether or not or how to use AI in their business. And I think that there's becoming more and more use cases that if you don't begin to lean into it, you will be left behind very quickly.
You will be. And I think that, to be candid, it took me a while to get on board. I think it's one of these things where I'm kind of like, the grumpy old man. I got tons of gray hair, just being like, I don't know if I want to adopt this. Do I really need to? But then when you see how fast others can move, the insights that they can gain, I was just like, this is something that I need to at least explore, to do so in a thoughtful way, obviously. But now it's completely changed how I work, how I learn, how I iterate on things. It's just fundamentally better. I am better with it. And so I think it's really, again, being thoughtful around how you use it, but you should be using it 100% if you want to stay competitive in the market today.
What are some of the misconceptions right now about low code or no code?
The misconceptions about low code, no code. So I think there was a previous misconception that low code, no code basically could not scale, was not secure. It was so abstracted that engineers could not work with it, right? If you talk to like a traditional engineer, I think they would laugh you out of the room if you said you wanted to use a low code tool. I think the next generation of tools, of which we are a part of, make it a lot, or really bridge the gap of where there was former deficiencies, right? These new no code tools are really giving you engineering led and engineering forward capabilities. And also, we operate in a world where engineers work alongside other product owners in a common visual language. So it's less about the limitations and more about a paradigm shift to say, look, I would normally, program in VS Code or my IDE of choice. And now I have a visual way to do that. And even with Xano, we announced XanoScript, which is currently in beta, which gives them basically a code-like experience that translates to the visual code. So you don't really have to sacrifice much of anything.
What was the driver behind being kind of like that product person led? So by that, I mean, you had mentioned earlier that you were looking for additional insights into what your development team was doing from a product perspective. What was kind of the conscious decision there to move that forward as the model behind the business?
Depending on who you ask, there's about 27 million developers in a world of 8 billion now, right? And so that's less than like half of a percent of people that build all of the technology that we use. And we already know that there is more software demand than there are people to create it. And product owner types like myself, like I am not a software engineer, we're the ones with the requirements and with the dreams. And normally the way you work with engineering teams is there's a process, you're writing tickets, you're writing user stories, you're passing it to them, then they don't necessarily understand what you're saying, and it's a back and forth process. But if I can unblock myself and have the engineers focus on the higher value things like performance, like making sure that I'm building a system of integrity and security, well, then it's a better way to work, a faster way to work, because I can get out my business value and then they can focus on the things really that matter from an engineering standpoint. And so the unlock was to say, look, in this new world, and this is especially true with AI, we're seeing a widening aperture of people that can now access the software building experience and they can participate in it. So we just wanted to be a part of that. And the visual piece of it is just a means to an end. It's to give them understanding as to what is going on. Because like I said before, if you don't understand it, you don't own it, right? And so we want to give that to people.
You struck a nerve there a little bit for me because I mean, I spent 15 years as a technical project manager. So really like I sat at that intersection of I'm going to bring this story to the dev team. Oh, they don't understand it. Okay, let's go back to the stakeholders, see if we can't rewrite it in a way that makes sense to the both of them. So yeah, I feel you there. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, yes, okay, I understand because I would consider myself very product minded also, but not necessarily overtly technical. I understand enough to be quite dangerous, but I'm not like not up on the all of the latest trends when it comes to actually hands-on keyboard. So yeah, it's there's a lot here that I think that it solves, that you guys are positioned so well. That how did you have that realization that this was the space that you needed to be in? Like, I think you said you've been working on this for 3+ years. So like, how did you get there other than just your own use case?
Really, the real answer is we solved our own problem. We didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. And when we launched and we saw so many people gravitating towards it, we realized like, okay, there might be something here. I think that it would be easy for me to say like, oh, we knew this was going to be a massive opportunity and just launch something, but we didn't even realize we wanted to be a venture backed company. We did this on as like a side project, and so we were like, hey, this might be cool for some people that are like us. And then when it started really taking off, we realized that we could actually have a larger impact around helping people create software and helping people like yourself that maybe you didn't necessarily know the how of how to build it, but you understood the why and the what. And if we gave you that power, what could you do? How could you unblock yourself? How could you help not only the company that you might be working at, but how could you dream and create something of your own one day? So that was really, I think, something that started to drive us when we started to hear these stories from our customers around what they were able to do with the tool.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, right? To have the realization, be like, I have this problem, and then develop something to support it, and then realize that there's a market need for it. And people
Mhm.
really then kind of gravitate towards that. What were some of the challenges that came along with going kind of from this being a side project that solves your own need to a venture backed organization?
Some of the challenges you're asking? I think along the way, really trying to figure out and put words to what we had and where there's a larger opportunity was something that was challenging because we could have built a fine business just, moving and kind of doing the status quo. But when you opt into venture, you're opting into exponential growth and you're opting into a certain kind of path to success. And that path is to say, this is more impactful than my backyard or my city. This is going to be world impactful, or we believe that. And I think coming to the conclusion, which we only did really after a year and some change, maybe 18 months, where we like sat together and said, look, I think that we have something really special. And I think that with the right partner, the right partners in place, we could have world impact. And that's what we've seen. Like now we've deployed over 100,000 backends across 90 plus countries, and it's crazy. And we're still small, right? Like we're not a big company. And so we're just getting started and we see so much more that can be done around having that type of impact. So I think like the challenge is always trying to find your story in the world of so much noise that's out there and being able to articulate it in a clear and concise way to where people believe you and people understand what you're trying to do, and they give you a shot when you put yourself out there.
Is there any exercises that you would suggest for people who are working on a startup that don't necessarily have their story defined?
Yes. So I
To
would
write that, you'll
say
need
it
to
really
enable
just comes down
ChatGPT.
to like iteration and practice. And what I mean by that is, before we raise money, before we put a pitch deck in front of an investor, I literally went to, 50 to 60 people in my network that some I knew, some I didn't know, but I did know that they all kind of would give me honest feedback. And I would just tell them, like, here's what it is. Here's like the value I think that we have. Here's why you should invest in it. And the first couple pitches were awful and I got some pretty harsh feedback, but that's actually what you need. You want to seek that. And over time, it gets more and more precise, right? It's like preparing for a fight. You don't just like hop into the ring. You're months and months and months of training and getting beat up and like understanding the different ways that you're going to strategize and present yourself. That's the best thing that you can do, because when you start doing that and you're talking to people that want you to succeed, so they're going to give you honest and candid feedback, by the time 50 or 60 are done and you step in front of that first investor, you have all those reps behind you, right? And you have now can clearly articulate it and even get to a point where you can decide whether it's not something you want to pursue, because the thing that you were doing, the thing that people understand isn't actually what you're excited about. Or you're like, okay, now I've crystallize it and I'm ready to like pitch it and grow it.
I also think with the repetitions, it's kind of that you become numb of the fact that you have these people who are giving you critical feedback, not in a bad way, but like you kind of get used to that hearing that no. So to hear no again, even at that opportunity of sitting in front of a table of VCs and they said, no, that's okay. Then you ask for the feedback. Okay, what could we do differently that would not necessarily change your mind, but like how do we improve this
Yeah.
conversation moving forward?
For sure. And just to be clear, like I don't very few VCs will tell you the truth. I think like it's a lot of energy to kind of give you really constructive feedback. It's better just like, oh, just not a right fit for our portfolio or something like that. That's why it's really good to go to people in your network again that can give you that because they'll give you the time and you're kind of I'm very grateful to all of the people that gave me that time because now I try to pay it forward when other people reach out to me. Even if I don't know them, I try to give them something because I feel like without that, we wouldn't be where we are. And so I genuinely believe it's putting in those reps and the iteration is the only way to crystallize your story and your narrative in the market.
I think that that's great advice. So let's change topics a little bit. What do you think is the biggest challenge that Xanos is facing in the next 18 to 24 months, and how do you guys plan to overcome it?
I think AI is both a threat and an opportunity, right? I think that before I remember when AI was gaining so much momentum, and especially with these like AI app builders, you kind of get worried as a founder. You're like, where do I fit in all of this? Is our product even going to be relevant? Is it over? And there's all these sensational headlines that are like, developers are dead and this tool is dead and all it's just and you kind of start to believe it. You're like maybe we are dead. But I think like in trying to find the signal through all of this noise, it's really understanding that at the end of the day, AI cannot replace human creativity, right? So even with this vibe coding movement, I think it's amazing. I think it's really opened people's eyes around the art of the possible. But when you want to go to production with something like that, when you really need it to drive a core business function of yours, that means you need to control it and you need to like understand what it is and you need to be a part of that process. And that's where we can play. So our biggest challenge and our opportunity is like we can't have AI form our story for us. We have to take control and say, this is where we stand. This is where we believe the best way to use AI is. And if you believe that story, then you should come and be a Xano customer. And if you don't, that's okay. You can there's like plenty of other tools that can align with the story or how you see the world.
I've had 60 or so of these interviews, and a lot of founders, regardless of what it is that they're in, they've just found AI being quite disruptive to their day to day life. And it's just trying to figure out how best to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it sounds like you're on a similar journey with a lot of these coding platforms that are popping up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really exciting and it's scary at the same time. And I think that any founder that tells you otherwise is probably lying. I think growing a business is hard and you're always kind of thinking, especially in a startup, you're always like have these existential moments where you're like, okay, are we going to survive? Are we going to last? But I think, the broader mission that we're on is to empower anyone to create scalable world-class software. And I think making sure that we stay true to that, making sure that our customers leave feeling empowered and that we were able to help them do something that they were not able to previously. As long as we continue to do that, I think we're going to be in a good place.
It's funny that you had mentioned like questioning what it is that you were doing. I was having a conversation with my wife last week, and I was just like, she's like, "How are you?" I was like, today's just been tough. Like being an entrepreneur, you take quite a bit of time of like introflexion, right? Like to think about what it is that you're doing and trying to put out in the world. And then you start to question, am I going about it the right way? Am I doing the right thing? And she just caught me in one of those days. And it's relieving for me to hear that regardless of where you are, kind of your startup journey, you still kind of have those internal conversations with yourself or with your other leadership team.
100%. It's part of the process, actually. And I think that the key is to introspect, take an insight from it, and then use that information to take your next step forward, right? And I think that as long as you feel the fire and the passion for why you embarked on the journey, that's really the most important piece. but you will always have moments of kind of asking yourself, wait, is this right? Am I like the biggest loser in the market? What's happening here? And I'm part of like a CEO group that combines, us with CEOs that are running public companies, and they have the same existential thoughts, right? And feelings. And so it doesn't go away. So just accepting it as part of the process is probably a good thing. And I think through introspection, whether it be in your business or your personal life, it usually causes you to make changes for the better, right? Like whether it be your health, how you're managing yourself, your finances, whatever it may be, sometimes these inflection points are needed, and that only comes through an introspection. And so I think it's good that you're going through that, and it's good that you're asking yourself, because it'll cause you to readjust, to either stay the course or to readjust to where you need to go.
Yeah, it's about testing and learning from those tests and then growing from whatever it is that I'm learning. Just continue to keep at it until the market says, okay, you need to pivot and find a different course forward. And I'm not quite to that point yet. So it seems like the market still kind of supports what it is that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more.
So Prakash, you've been such a great guest. At the end of each one of my episodes, I give all of my guests 90 seconds to pitch anything that they are passionate about. So that could be Xanos, that could be anything. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Thank you. I mean, in line with maybe what we've been talking about, I think if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you have an idea that you want to explore, whether it's in tech and you use Xano or not, it doesn't really matter. But I think start putting in those reps and start with that like half step. Because I think too many times, I think there's an analysis paralysis to starting something new and to starting something fresh. But even taking a half step into it and trying to make a little bit of forward progress is really important. And it's kind of that journey is the reward type of mentality that you should enter it with. So just because we were talking about it, I think we need more entrepreneurs, and especially in a world with AI, it can enable you to do as an individual so much more. So that's probably what I would leave this conversation with.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your time today.
Of course. Thank you, Brian.